What up, what up? It's Garage Gym Homie, and today I want to talk about how to make amends and how I made amends. Is it worth it? Before we get into this here, please click the subscribe button. I got content coming out all the dang time for you. So click subscribe and let's get into this, man. So when I got sober almost 10 years ago, I made a decision. I was ready to be done for good with getting high, and I was willing to do whatever it takes. I made a contract with God that I was willing to go to any lengths to get sober, any lengths. So I started going through the 12 steps, and I went through the fourth step, and I made a list of in the fourth step where I make inventory, and I list my resentments and my part in everything, how I did the world wrong. And I realized that my problems were of my own making. So then on step 8 and 9, step 8 says, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And step 9 says, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So on step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. The beautiful thing about that is that list was already made for me when I did the fourth step. That the program, the 12-step program, it just works beautifully. And so that list was made for me. So all I had to do was extract the names out of that fourth step, and I had the list of all the people I had harmed. And I was willing to make amends to them all. Now, that doesn't mean that I was going to make amends to them all. Some of them weren't. My mom wasn't alive. She died of brain cancer years before I got sober. I mean, many years. I was probably 21 when she passed, before I moved to LA. And, I never got to make amends to her. So I'm going to tell you how I made amends to her. So, we come up with things in our head like, we fantasize, like, oh, this is how it's going to look when I make amends with these people. And, that's why I have a good sponsor. That's the point of good sponsorship, because in my head, I was just going to start running around town, making amends with people. Hey, man, sorry I banged your girlfriend. Sorry I stole from you this or that. My sponsor had a different idea. We're going to go through the list one by one, and we're going to decide, how to make amends. So, and nothing turned out the way my head's, my disease of alcoholism is right here. So this is also where the plans in my head center, So thank God I have a good sponsor. So we started with the first person on the list. The first thing you do to make amends, first of all, to amend something, remember, is to change your behavior. There's two kinds of amends. There's direct amends, where you directly make amends with somebody that you've done wrong, and you go out to them. And there's living amends, which is where you change your behavior. And that's the important amends, that you stop the behavior that you were doing to why you got to make amends in the first place. And making amends is one, you hear a lot of people in AA say, one day at a time. Even people not in AA probably heard that, one day at a time. That's just a saying that comes out of the side of people's necks. That's not real AA. It's okay to say that you're done for good. Because when you're not done for good, you're not going to make amends to people if you think there's a chance you have to go out and make amends to them again. So we started with my father, and he was the first person on the list. And I was, man, have I mistreated my father. And he was always there for me through my disease. And man, he is the best. And so my sponsor's like, well, how do you want to make amends to him? I was like, oh, I'll just sit him down at the house and, talk to him and whatever. My sponsor's like, well, isn't that kind of like taking him to the scene of the crime? Isn't there maybe more of a special place? And I didn't think of that. Like, yeah, that my heart's not in that, you know, just sitting him down at the house and, you know, making amends and, you know, this and that. So I took him to the synagogue and I sat my dad down. And just so you have an idea, I was 3 months sober when I started making amends. That's where I was. And I sat him down, and in 3 months, my dad already knew that I was a different person. I put my heart and soul into these 12 steps, and God changed in like that. God did for me in a matter of minutes what years of therapy and treatment centers and AA meetings could never do. That's what these 12 steps did. My dad already knew my amends were coming from here. So I sat him down. I said, Dad, can I take you to the synagogue? I didn't even have my driver's license yet. So he drove us there after work. I sat him down. I said, I took you here because for one reason, this is a place where I can not only feel close to you, but also close to my spirituality. For one reason or another, I never treated my disease of addiction and alcoholism. And as you now know, I am treating it. And I'm at the part of the program, not my program, the program, where we make amends. And I'm here to make amends with you, Dad. And these are my amends in words, but my real amends are in my actions. And I apologize for mistreating you, and I will never treat you like that again. And he accepted my amends, and it was beautiful. And God guided me right through it. And it's scary to make amends, is go to people and address the old behavior and all that. And the way I made amends to my dad, what I said was pretty much the way I made amends to everybody. The wording really doesn't change much. So the second person on my list was my mother, and she had passed away. She was at a, you know, she's buried at a cemetery here in Michigan. I was like, well, I can't make amends to her. My sponsor, good sponsorship. And see, now the result of good sponsorship, now I can be a good sponsor to others when these things come up. And I can guide people on how to make amends. I wrote a letter to my mom. And my brother took me to the cemetery, and I read my mom the letter. And it came from my heart, and I made amends to her. And I burned the letter and poured the ashes on her grave. And I walked away from there being at peace with her death for the first time. I cried, and it came from my heart. And I stood there with my brother, and I got to make amends, and I got to tie up all the loose ends. So making amends might take you to the cemetery. Making amends might take you to different places. I mean, it's not always about just sitting across from the table from someone and saying, hey, I'm sorry. You know, I didn't go on Facebook and hit people up on Messenger and say, hey, dude, sorry, bro. Like, you know, I might have gotten to a part where I mistreated a woman, and she's married now. And it would cause more harm for me to go and, you know, like go to her and say, hey, I'm sorry, I mistreated. She's in a marriage. I'm not going to do that. You know, that's why I have a sponsor to go through each one with. So I made amends with my brother. I made amends with my grandparents. My other grandparents who were passed away, I also went to the cemetery and made amends to them. So there's something deeper here. There's more here. My stepmother, who I say mom when I talk to her, I sat her down and I made amends to her, and she cried. It brought us closer. And during that process of making amends, every time I was in my head and I was like, man, I want to say the perfect thing. And as soon as I started talking, it was just like these YouTube videos, just like when I'd speak at the treatment center, just like every experience I've had since I've been sober. God just takes over, and it's always perfect. Now, not everybody might accept your amends. You know, you might, somebody like I made amends to this woman. I wrote handwritten letters to some people. I mailed them out. I had a woman call me back and say, well, I want to know every little thing you're making amends for. And I asked my sponsors, like, she's kind of pressing me, like, she's not accepting my amends. He's like, you already made your amends. You cleaned up your side of the street. She just wants to torture you, you know, a little bit, and you don't owe her that anymore. You know, she was trying to dig at me, and that's why I have a spine. That's why I'm not doing this alone, running around town. So as soon as, and I remember, man, I was making amends with my stepmom, and that day, I remember taking a shower, like right after that, and the light bulb clicked on. I was in the shower. I'll never forget this moment. And I was like, man, AA makes complete sense to me right now. It's so simple. All it's about is relying on God and letting God guide you through your life. It was like, I remember it was clear as day. The light bulb finally went on. All of these years I had thought AA was about, you got to go to 5 meetings a week, and you got to write 10 things in your gratitude journal, and you got to read 3 pages of this book, and you got to call your sponsor. There was like a million things to do in AA. AA was about one thing, and that was building my relationship with God and letting God guide me. God will guide me to how many AA meetings I need. God will guide me to, you know, how often to talk to my sponsor. God's going to guide me to how to properly make amends with people, who I'm going to make amends with, who I'm not, you know, the right word. It was all about forming a relationship with God. And that's all AA is about, a spiritual program so God could solve my problems that I couldn't solve. And I just remember it was so clear as day, all these years struggling and complicating things, you know. So then, listen to this, to wrap this story up on how to make amends. You know, 4 months into sobriety, I came home from California, and I had warrants out for my arrest in Michigan. The whole reason I left Michigan in the first place is because I ran away from jail time, prison time here. I had multiple warrants out in different counties. So when I got home, my lawyer said, I want you to stay low key, get some counseling, go to AA, da-da-da. I was in bad shape. Finally, it was time for me to make amends to the court system. Right when I got on step 9, my lawyer called me. He said, it's time to go clear up your warrants. He didn't call me because he knew I was making amends. It just perfectly worked out that way. So I walked into the courts, and I got jail time. My sponsor was there, and I went in depth in this in my story. I got jail. I had to do 6 months in jail, starting at 4 months sober. And it was the best jail time a man could ever have. I sponsored 10 addicts and alcoholics in jail when I was newly sober, because I already been through the steps. I got my hands on a big book. And I know a few of them are still recovered today, and they're helping other people, man. That's how I spent my time in jail. Making amends took me to jail. I was willing to go to any lengths, even if that meant going to jail, to get sober. Years later, man, I made a whole video about this. I realized I abandoned a dog. I had a dog, and I found out that I abandoned him when I was in California. I made a video about it. Years later, I had to make amends to that dog. I found out where that dog was, and I found out that he had a home. It's an unbelievable story. If you look in my playlist for spirituality, look at the video about how the dog saved my life. It's a crazy freaking story. I mean, if you heard this story, you would have no choice but to believe in God. So making amends comes in multiple forms. Sometimes I may donate. If I couldn't make amends directly to somebody, I might have gone and made a donation to something they were interested in, like a school or a good cause. I've had to clean up my credit. There's so many forms it comes in. And God's going to guide me through the whole thing. So this is an experience you are not going to want to miss, cleaning up the past And now I'm so honored I can help other people clean up their past and watch them help other people clean up their past and see this family grow around me. So that's what I got, man. Just wanted to share a little bit about my experience with making amends and how it went. God bless all of you, man. Together, let's get this dang muscle. I'm out.